Hello, Midnights. We hope you enjoy our stories. Next, a ghostly vow, the ritual of Chinese ghost marriage. Let us know where you are listening from, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you. Chinese ghost marriage, or Minghun, is a centuries-old tradition that serves as a bridge between the living and the deceased. Far from being a simple macabre ritual, it is a profound expression of a family's love, grief, and commitment to their ancestors. However, the practice in modern times has revealed a dark and criminal underside, highlighting a stark conflict between ancient custom and contemporary law. The tradition has been practiced for over 2,000 years, with some scholars suggesting its origins may date back as far as 3,000 years. Today, it still persists, particularly in the more rural areas of China, often influenced by a mix of traditional beliefs and modern socioeconomic pressures. The ritual of Minghun is not a random superstition. It is built on a logical framework of cultural beliefs rooted in filial piety and ancestor veneration. Families perform these marriages as an act of duty to their deceased children, believing an unmarried spirit is a lonely, restless presence that can bring misfortune. Providing the deceased with a spouse is seen as a way to restore the balance of yin and yang, bringing harmony to both the spiritual and living worlds. For a deceased woman, a ghost marriage is essential for her spiritual identity, as it gives her a husband's lineage and a place to be venerated on an ancestral altar. Without this marriage, her spirit is believed to be without a home, a very real spiritual and social problem that the ritual is designed to solve. This belief system is deeply embedded in ancient Chinese thought, with records of the practice and philosophical justifications appearing in classical texts like the Book of Rites and the Mencius. The philosopher Mencius, for example, argued that it was an unfilial act to allow a son to die without a wife, providing a powerful philosophical basis for the tradition. The tradition's journey from ancient custom to modern-day issue highlights its deep roots and remarkable resilience. Dating back to the Han Dynasty, the practice was prevalent during the Tang and Song dynasties, originally performed to appease the spirits of the unmarried. Despite being banned by the Communist Party in 1949 as a feudal superstition, the custom endured in rural areas of provinces like Shaanxi and Shaanxi. This ban was part of a wider campaign against the Four Olds: old customs, old culture, old habits, and old ideas, but failed to eradicate a belief system so deeply ingrained in rural communities. In recent decades, the practice has seen a resurgence, a phenomenon fueled by a combination of increased wealth and a severe gender imbalance in some regions. With more money, families can afford to pay for ceremonies and even for corpses. The high number of unmarried men, a demographic consequence of the former one-child policy and a strong cultural preference for sons, has also driven a demand for wives, both living and deceased. Despite its resilience, the practice of Minghun remains extremely uncommon in contemporary China. This rarity is a result of several powerful social, political, and cultural factors. First, the practice is a direct violation of Chinese law and is seen by the government as a form of illegal feudal superstition. This legal stigma, combined with the criminal underside of grave robbing and murder, makes it a high-risk and socially dangerous activity. Second, the rapid modernization and urbanization of China have dramatically changed the country's social fabric. The majority of the population now lives in cities, where traditional folk beliefs hold less sway and are often replaced by modern, secular values. Younger, urban generations overwhelmingly view ghost marriage as an archaic, illogical, and disturbing ritual. Third, the practice is fundamentally at odds with modern understandings of marriage. Contemporary marriage is defined by legal status, individual consent, and a focus on building a future together. Ghost marriage, in contrast, is an extra-legal spiritual union arranged without the consent of the deceased, making it incomprehensible to most people in a modern context. Finally, while the demand for ghost brides has increased in some areas, the supply of available bodies, specifically unmarried deceased women, is inherently limited and finite, which perversely drives up the price and the criminal activity but does not make the practice more common overall. The ceremony itself is a complex and highly symbolic affair. While a modern wedding is centered on two living people, a ghost marriage is performed to unite two deceased individuals, or a living person with a deceased one, with a mystical layer woven into every step. The ceremony is meticulously planned, often with the help of a Minghun matchmaker who serves as a spiritual liaison. This matchmaker is typically an elderly woman in the community who is believed to have a special connection to the spirit world. The process begins with the deceased's families agreeing to the union, sometimes after a supernatural sign, such as a dream where the spirit of the deceased expresses its desire to be married. A dowry and bride price are negotiated and exchanged, but in symbolic form. These are not real goods or money, but paper effigies, known as yizha, of homes, clothes, cars, and even modern items like smartphones and iPads. These effigies are burned with the belief that they will be transported to the afterlife for the new couple's use. The wedding ceremony itself is a ghostly reflection of a living wedding, complete with a wedding portrait featuring a photo or even an effigy of the deceased. A banquet is held, and the couple's spirit tablets are placed on the family altar, officially uniting them in the afterlife. The climax of the ceremony is often the exhumation of the bride's bones, which are then reburied next to her groom, literally uniting them for eternity. In cases where the deceased were buried separately and exhumation is not an option, symbolic hair samples, nails, or pieces of clothing are used to create the spiritual bond. For families who chose cremation, a small urn of ashes or even a photograph is used as a symbolic stand-in for the body. The tradition also carries a unique mystical layer, especially in Taiwan. Families may leave a red envelope containing money, hair, or fingernails on the side of a road. If an unmarried man finds this envelope and picks it up, he is believed to have been chosen by the deceased woman's spirit to be her husband. This encounter is seen not as a coincidence, but as a direct intervention from the spirit world, reinforcing the belief that the dead have agency and can influence the living. The man is expected to marry the deceased woman's spirit, becoming her husband in the afterlife and honoring her in rituals. Ghostly incidents and paranormal activity are a cornerstone of the ghost marriage mythology. The entire practice is predicated on the belief that a deceased, unmarried spirit is restless and unhappy. Families who perform these ceremonies often report having experienced misfortunes, strange noises, or bad luck that they attribute to the unhappy spirit. Conversely, after the ghost marriage is performed, they often claim to experience a sense of peace and a return to good fortune, believing the spirit has been appeased. These personal experiences, whether real or psychological, reinforce the belief that the spirits of the dead are actively involved in the lives of the living and that the ghost marriage ritual is a necessary and effective remedy for their spectral unhappiness. For some families, however, the process can complicate grief, as they are forced to confront the death and arrange a wedding rather than being able to simply mourn. Ghost marriage differs fundamentally from a traditional or normal marriage in several key ways, primarily in its participants, purpose, and symbolic nature. The most obvious difference, that at least one of the participants is deceased. A normal marriage is a union between two living, consenting individuals, creating a legal and social contract in this life. A ghost marriage, however, is a spiritual union, where the contract exists primarily in the afterlife. The primary purpose of a normal marriage is to establish a family, build a life together, and procreate. While procreation is also a goal in some forms of ghost marriage, the main purpose is to resolve a spiritual issue. It's about appeasing an unhappy spirit, ensuring the deceased's spiritual well-being, and restoring cosmic harmony for the living. In a normal marriage, dowries, rings, and other gifts are real and tangible. In a ghost marriage, these items are largely symbolic. A dowry isn't money for the living bride's family, but paper effigies burned to be used in the afterlife. The union is not legally recognized by the state. It exists solely in the spiritual and cultural realms. Normal marriage is based on the consent of the two individuals entering the union. Ghost marriage is arranged by the families, sometimes after receiving a supernatural sign, but without the explicit living consent of the deceased. This highlights a fundamental difference in the locus of agency, which shifts from the individual to the family and the spirits. The tragic contradiction of Minghun is where the intention is rooted in love and respect, but the outcome has become tragically criminal. The demand for female corpses has created a horrifying black market. Grave robbers steal bodies, and in the most extreme cases, women are even murdered to be sold as ghost brides. One documented case in 2015 saw a man arrested for murdering two women and selling their corpses for $2,800 and $3,900 respectively. The price for a corpse can range dramatically, from 4,000 yuan to 70,000 yuan, illustrating the commercialization of this once sacred ritual. The price is often determined by the age and physical condition of the deceased, with younger, well-preserved bodies fetching the highest prices. This modern black market often targets the bodies of young women, and in some documented cases mentally disabled or poor women have been murdered specifically to be sold as ghost brides. Furthermore, the practice reinforces a patriarchal worldview by tying a woman's spiritual well-being and honor to her marital status, even in death. This is a subtle but significant negative implication that contradicts modern values of gender equality. In response to these crimes, authorities in some rural areas have installed CCTV cameras and even concrete coffins to deter grave robbers. The government has also taken legal action. with a 2006 case seeing 3 grave robbers sentenced to prison terms for their involvement in the trade. What makes ghost marriage such a compelling and mythical topic is its blend of folklore, fear, and human emotion. It sits at the intersection of life and death, blurring the line between the two and giving voice to a universal anxiety about the unknown. The core of the myth is the belief that the dead are not passive but active agents. The spirits of the deceased are not simply gone, they have desires, needs, and the power to influence the world of the living. This belief transforms death from a finality into a transition, where social obligations and emotional needs continue. The stories of spirits communicating their wishes through dreams or omens are not just traditions but a living mythology that informs family decisions. Ghost marriage provides a tangible ritual for dealing with an intangible fear, the fear of an unresolved death. An unmarried death, especially for a young person, is considered a tragedy and an unnatural state. The ghost marriage ritual is a powerful narrative tool that allows families to regain a sense of control and closure. It provides a structured way to address the unfulfilled desires of a loved one and, by extension, alleviate the family's own grief and guilt. The act of burning paper effigies, placing spirit tablets on altars, and reburying bones is not just symbolic. It's an act of magical thinking that literally bridges the earthly and spiritual realms. These rituals are believed to have real-world consequences, creating a tangible connection to the afterlife. This sense of a permeable boundary between worlds is a classic mythical theme that gives the practice its powerful mystical charge. The perspective on Chinese ghost marriage varies widely across cultures shaped by differing views on death, marriage, and the afterlife. Some cultures have a more nuanced understanding because they have similar traditions. For example, the Nuer people of southern Sudan and the Achuot of Africa practice a form of ghost marriage where a woman may marry a deceased man to ensure his lineage continues, with the children born to the living wife considered the offspring of the deceased husband. This shows a shared human concern for legacy and the continuation of the family name that transcends cultural boundaries. Another similar, albeit less formal practice existed in some parts of rural France and Sardinia, where a woman could be symbolically married to her deceased fiancé to honor their promise. In some parts of India, specific rituals are performed for people who die before marriage, which, while not a formal marriage, share a similar purpose of appeasing a restless spirit. In many Western cultures, marriage is strictly a legal and social union between two living, consenting adults. The concept of ghost marriage is often viewed as strange, morbid, or archaic. The use of a deceased person's corpse or remains would likely be seen as a violation of modern burial norms and a desecration of the dead. The emphasis on individual autonomy and consent in Western societies makes the idea of a marriage arranged for the deceased difficult to comprehend. The criminal element of modern ghost marriage, grave robbing, and murder further solidifies a negative view of the practice. Religious views on ghost marriage are diverse. In Abrahamic religions, marriage is a sacred institution for the living, typically dissolved by death. The concept of marrying the dead is absent and could be seen as contradictory to theological teachings about the afterlife. Conversely, in traditions with a more fluid view of the afterlife, such as Buddhism or some forms of shamanism, there might be a greater understanding of the spiritual anxiety of an unattached soul. While they may not practice ghost marriage themselves, they might understand the logic behind a ritual designed to help a spirit find peace or a more favorable reincarnation. Ultimately, perspectives on ghost marriage are a powerful illustration of cultural relativity. What one culture sees as a profound act of love and filial piety, another may see as a disturbing and anachronistic ritual. The practice challenges our most fundamental definitions of life, death, and social relationships, forcing a cross-cultural dialogue about our deepest values. In conclusion, the story of Chinese ghost marriage is a profound example of the friction between tradition and modernity. It reveals that the spiritual anxieties of the past continue to shape the lives of people today. While it is driven by a deep desire to honor and care for the dead, its manifestation in the modern world has led to violence and exploitation. The contradiction between its sacred purpose and its criminal consequences makes it a powerful, albeit haunting, illustration of how ancient customs can clash with contemporary ethical standards.